When you think of great food photography, the immediate things that come to mind are probably great color, creativity, beautiful lighting, and ultimately great images. But in today's video, we are going to take a step back and look and focus on the bedrock of it all, composition. Before we can think about more details about food styling, we're going to spend some time talking about composition techniques and how you can use them in your food photography. It is important to remember that composition techniques are guidelines, not rules. They aren't here to hinder your creativity at all, so you shouldn't feel like you need to stick to them so rigidly that you feel restricted. Rules are there to be broken when the time is right, but it's always good to understand the rule you're breaking to know if breaking it is actually going to improve your photo. There are 5 composition techniques that I come back to again and again in my food photography, and those are the rule of thirds, the golden ratio, also known as the Phi Grid, dynamic symmetry, the golden triangle, and the golden spiral. I've created a handy rule of thirds printout grid for you to help you plan your compositions more effectively. So you can go ahead and click the little link up here to get started with that. The purpose of these techniques in food photography is to give you the tools you need to achieve the best possible photo. Food photography is a form of still life photography, and these principles will help you develop your style and build your confidence in the images you produce. Using techniques like the rule of thirds and other ratios for your composition is also going to help you create balance in your photos. Knowing how to balance your props, the food, and negative space is going to allow you to control where the viewer's eye is drawn to in your photo and more effectively tell the story you are trying to tell. So let's dive into a few examples of how you can use these techniques to improve your own images. So let's start with this image of these dumplings. Straight away you can see there's a diagonal layout going on from the bottom left to the top right of the frame. So let's go ahead and overlay the composition technique I used and break it down a little bit more. First off, there's the direction of the props. You want to try and use the lines and intersections as the key points when you're using a composition technique, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to lay everything out exactly on the lines. That can easily look way too obvious and like you're just creating a carbon copy of the composition grid in your photo. I use the main diagonal line and the intersectional line at the top to place the wooden board parallel to those lines, which creates a bit of a defining shape on the edge of the frame. Just making sure that I'm taking advantage of this technique in my supporting props. The little wooden spoon or tray thing is also facing in the direction of that main line to create that movement through the frame. The main steamer basket is just a little bit off from the bottom intersection, so I've tried to mainly use that as my main focal point. The chopsticks are a little bit rogue, but this is the whole point too. Not every single thing in the frame has to follow a rule, but we can take parts of the technique to give us a full structure. The top plate is just skimming that line, and I did that to really finish off this diagonal line that we have going on. So that's how I use that technique. So let's take a look at another example with a different technique, this time the golden spiral. Composition techniques like the golden spiral are really useful for bringing a bit of flow and order to busy images, and yes, this is a pretty busy image for me with my usual minimal style. The golden spiral is a really great one for creating a sense of movement through the frame because of the soft curve. It's a really nice way to add some dimension. So first off, we have the rolling pin, starting off that spiral on a slight diagonal and beginning the overall shape in the frame. The rest of the galettes and the props just kind of follow that line round, with the most interesting point of those plums and the maple syrup bowl in the center of the spiral. With the little fork that is in the bowl, I chose that direction because it kind of imitates the direction of the spiral in the top left, continuing that feeling of movement. So when you're composing your own images, you don't need to follow the spiral the whole way around. You can just use part of it or use more of the directional elements to create a bit of shape and movement in your image. Okay, let's look at one more example before we move on to some tips and tricks for using composition techniques in your own work. So the Phi Grid is a bit more of an advanced rule of thirds grid. The principles of how it works are exactly the same, but it's based on the golden ratio, which makes the middle third of the grid a little bit thinner. I really like to use this grid to help me place my horizons when I'm shooting straight on images. In this cake, you can kind of see how I use the line to position the line of the backdrop, although the shallow depth of field does make it a little bit hard to see. The next thing I did was focus on the left 2/3 of the grid to place that main focal point of the cut cake. I also used the top middle line to position the top of the slice, which allows for a nice amount of negative space at the top of the frame. Negative space is a really powerful tool in food photography because you want your images to have a clear focus. And if they're too cluttered with props, it can make it difficult for the viewer to know where to look, so I tend to keep it on the simple side. So not only are these techniques useful for choosing where to place things in the frame, but also where not to. So once you understand the main principles behind the composition technique you're going to use, one of the best ways to start putting them into practice is to start sketching out your photos before you shoot. When I started sketching out my compositions before I started my photo shoot, I noticed a dramatic improvement in my work. I found myself thinking in a more intentional way about the elements in my photo, resulting in more powerful images that started to get my work noticed. Sketching out your photos will help you understand your food photography style too, because you'll be actively broadening your horizons and trying out these techniques in a structured way. You'll probably explore areas of food photography you wouldn't have otherwise, and somewhere along the way, you'll find your groove and style. So sketching your composition before you start does not mean you need to be an artist in any way or spend hours making a detailed drawing of your photo before you start. Mostly when I'm doing this, I'm just doing a rough structure of the main shapes, and I'll probably add some notes about lighting, backgrounds, and prop choices. I've created a printable rule of thirds grid for you, which you can download from the link right here, so you can easily get started with planning out your images. I personally shoot tethered in Capture One, and one of my favorite features is the option to add overlays to the live view screen. I've created PNG overlays of all the composition techniques so that whenever I'm shooting, I can have the grid on the screen to help assist me while I'm setting up my scene. All of these overlays are available to download inside Food Photography Academy if you're a member. So if you're interested in joining for this resource and a bunch of other cool food photography education, then check out the link in the description. So there's a few tips and tricks for you to use composition techniques to improve your food photography. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Right here. No,